Well, before Santa can get to your house, there has to be toys. And before there can be toys, there must be a toy creator. So where do the elves go when they need to shop? Maybe they come here to see Brad Peterson at Tech for Kids. Brad, thank you for being with 100 Huntley Street. Crazy. I've got so much catching up to do. What's the hot seller on our tables here today?
Well, we have different things for different kids because, of course, different kids like different things. But all of these things represent things that are extremely popular in the market right now. In terms of what's really topical and really hot as of today, probably number one on this table would be Jemmies. This is an activity toy that has really picked up a lot of momentum in the marketplace. And what it is girls make these cool little crystal creations.
Yeah, show us what I call the corking tool. Because that's in my day, we did these things out of yarn. Now you've got, like, show me how that goes on there.
Yeah, so the system is really simple. There's these bands that girls take out of the Jemmy's design studio. They put it onto this tool, and you'll see it stretches the band out.
Just like what we used to do.
And once it's stretched out like that, they then take their Jemmy crystals, and all the crystals have a little slit inside and what happens is you just clip it on like that, and it stays on, and they go around, and they keep clipping these.
Okay, and now you've got something happening here that's another very tactile making thing.
Yeah, so boys like bugs, okay, and they like making gross things. When I was a kid, creepy crawlers were huge. The problem with creepy crawlers are you had to plug them into the wall. Secondly, they had plates that got really hot.
Metal plates.
Metal plates.
Yes.
Lots of reports of people catching their houses on fire, which actually was an issue. So as things have progressed, people have been looking for ways to take old play patterns and make them into something that's viable for today. So again, using the same light curing gel technology I showed you, the MagiPen, we're able to do the exact same process. So Fright Factory's got the same gels that come in these syringes that you pour into the molds. Once you've poured them in the mold, you turn on your Fright Factory. You can see that it lights up and it activates. And then I turn this crank and it runs that light bar back and forth over top of the characters. And after I do that for a period of time, I take out my mold.
Come on, and this does the same thing that creepy crawlies used to do. No metal molds. It's just cold. You're ready to go.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Okay, you're the largest manufacturer of snow toys in Canada, and this Polaris looks like how Dad plays.
Right.
Tell us about the success that's been.
Yeah, you know, when I was a kid, if you had the GT Snow Racer, you were the coolest kid in town, certainly on the hill at that moment. So we sat back and we were, as Canadians, we think we know winter better than most, since we get a pretty good session of that during the winter months. But we said, what would be cool if we could take the GT Snow Racer and update it to what we want for today? So we started with just kind of like that white canvas of, this is what it looked like back when I was a kid, how would we update it today? And we said, well, it should look like a Polaris snowmobile. It should have suspension. It should have twin-tip skis. It should have adjustability.
It does.
And we literally just started from that white space, and again, everything goes from the imagination into reality. It all starts with a thought.
What's the lowest point you've gotten to personally? Let's talk you as the owner now.
Yeah.
In trying to ride this wild world of toy making, what's the lowest point you guys hit?
Well, the lowest point is that I actually ran my company into the ground. When I first started off in this business, we started off with tremendous momentum. We grew a company from a basement that was in Western Canada to become the largest distributor of toys in Canada at the time. And we had tremendous momentum in that process. And quite frankly, that probably led to a little bit of hubris and just a lack of real awareness of what could change in the toy space.
So your inner character was affecting your outer success.
Absolutely.
How did you get a grip on that?
Well, I think that life has a funny way of doing it for you. You know, when you are suddenly hit with the adversity of a bank calling you and saying you're going to be in special loans, that's a real quick reality check. And for us in our first distribution company, we went through that. We felt the pain of sitting through a very difficult and dark period where we wrestled with trying to save a company from capitulation.
Does God enter into that debate for you, that kind of terrible business dark tunnel that you're going through?
100%.
What happened? How did God interrupt your business decline?
You know, I've spent a lot of time kind of reflecting on this because I've looked at, as a person of faith who's grown up aware of my spiritual bearing, and certainly I grew up in an amazing family that taught me, gave me I guess the foundation of my Christian roots. I was always aware of my place in terms of being created and having a purpose in my life that God wanted me to fulfill. I think the problem is that as humans we're incredibly flawed, and our flaws tend to lead towards one of arrogance. You know, the original sin, pride. You know, Lucifer thought he could be God. As I read through the Old Testament, I look at people like Joseph, you know, who initially was a very pride-filled person, who his brothers tried to kill him and then was brought down to his knees. You know, Moses, who started off as a prince after, of course, going through tremendous adversity to become a prince, became a prince and then was humbled tremendously and forced to live in the wilderness for a number of years. I look back and consider that I went through that wilderness period, and it was a part of the crucible that was important to developing my character. At the time, it was terrible, and I would certainly not wish that kind of challenge on anyone. But I also look at it as being a real blessing, that it was a time that I had no choice but to trust in God, because everything I could do, I was at my limit. I had nothing left to be able to do myself.
How do you trust in God? You've got international plants, you've got incredible competition. YouTube could invent a new toy tomorrow and this thing's all gone. How do you trust in God? What's your discipline? What's your practice?
I'm a big believer in habits and behaviors and setting and creating the proper habits. You know, for me, my faith is a priority. It's not something that I just occasionally do. It's something that is an important piece of who I am, to be authentically myself.
What do you do in your faith habits? What are they?
I spend a half hour to an hour every morning in devotions and prayer and getting grounded with gratitude in terms of what is my purpose? What am I trying to do with this opportunity that God has given me that can impact the marketplace? How can I create meaningful impact in my team of people here first, and then through them influence millions of people around the world?
Wow. What do you read? What do you get grounded in?
I gotta say my favorite right now is Nicky Gumbel.
The Alpha series across Canada, his basic teachings.
The Alpha series it was the beginning, and that's something that I've actually been through with my family, and I think I would recommend it highly. I think it's a great foundation for most people to get clarity about just what does your faith mean? What is the foundation of your faith? But beyond that, he's got an app called the Bible in 1 year. And in 1 year, you go through the entire Bible. You start off with a psalm or proverb with some narrative around it, into the New Testament with some narrative, and then into the Old Testament with some narrative. You know, I was actually this morning reading about Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar. Again, a story about hubris, right? Where Nebuchadnezzar, who, interesting guy, because you know, he actually was a servant of the Lord. So you read about this one. How did this happen? I mean, Israel was brought into captive by this guy. So there's lots of interesting storyline around that. But ultimately, then his pride became his downfall until he was forced into the wilderness to become an ox. Or act like an ox anyways, where God humbled him. And I look at that as another just small story in time, in antiquity, that points to that our flawed human nature tends to want to digress to the point where we think we can do it on our own, that we're in control. At the end of the day, you're a speck on a speck floating through the universe. You know, your days are numbered, and you know you came from somewhere, you're here for a reason, and you're going somewhere, right? So with all that in consideration, why try and prove to yourself that you have it within you to do the things that will make you happy? You need to know that your actions, your habits, are an important part of creating your God-given purpose in life. But at the end of the day, it's got to be God-centered. God has a plan for you. He created you, and He will allow you to do wonderful things if you remain open to it.
Brad Peterson, founder of Tech for Kids. You're going to make a lot of families happy this Christmas. Thank you for the company, and thank you for your story.
Thank you.